Thank you for joining us today for this workshop series. Today we're going to talk about cybersecurity and staying safe in your digital world. I put this slide here to show you a little bit of the data behind some of the news that you're seeing since the Yahoo breach in 2013 that recorded billions to now. You can see that this is just some of the largest data breaches. There are certainly ones that are not even on here, and the point of this is that as we go through the slides today, we're going to be talking about protecting your data and protecting your assets. And there's a good possibility that some or all of our data is already out there. Our personal data is already out there, so we want to be even more cautious when people might approach us with part of our data. This gives you another idea of why people always ask why is it so rampant? Why do we have hackers? I tell people in a lot of the training that I give, everyone knows why you break into Fort Knox. We know what's there. We know what the motive is, right? And I think sometimes we lose sight of the fact that, the motive here is money. Since just in a 5-year span between October 2013 and May 2018, the FBI reports a $12 billion loss total. And so there is reason. That's why they're out there doing it. Is to try to scam business, try to scam personal, try to get a hold of your assets. So one of the first things we want to do is understand the types of threats that are out there. In our industry, you'll hear people talk about them as called threat vectors. Threat vectors are just the different ways or the different paths that malicious actors might take to get to you. Email being one of them. And last year, the Verizon report came out and said 96% of all attacks came through email, originated at email. Some of them would then be tied to website, because if you click on a hyperlink, that takes you to a website. But there's other hacks that you hear. People broke through firewalls, or they broke through a wireless network, or they were able to steal data off of a USB drive. Social engineering is a piece of that. It is also tied into email, where people are trying to pose as someone you might know and email you, or get you to click on a link in your Facebook activity, things of that nature. Remote access, mobile. Another large one that a lot of people don't really consider until we saw the WikiLeaks and others, where we're starting to see insiders, right? These are trusted people that you hire that have either came there for the wrong reason, or just decided that someone approached them and they would sell information for money. So that's becoming another place that we need to be careful of as business owners. We need to watch for insider threat as well. And then finally, this is in the last several months even, you're starting to see an uptick in phone calls. So you've got scams going on, and what happens is you get a call and they'll purport themselves to be either the IRS or Microsoft and say that you owe them money and that you can take care of this over the phone. And what they're really trying to get you to do is give them asset information, meaning credit card information, or in some cases they'll even try to get you to pay for it through your iTunes account, things of that nature. So just wanted you to be aware that these are all different pathways or threat vectors that they try to take to get to you. We talk about what are the risks, right? The first risk that we really see, as you can imagine, is monetary, that we spoke about, right? The fraudulent money transfer and payments is one of the largest ones that we're seeing with business email compromise. This is where they're asking you to, or it looks like maybe someone you work with says, hey, will you transfer money? Will you pay this? You might get a Verizon bill, for example, and they want you to pay it online, or they say that you're past due, they're going to terminate you, things of that nature. So the risk is that you might lose money or have money taken from you fraudulently. Another risk is that you might have your data stolen and encrypted, right? This is, I've known some people that have had everything on their hard drives encrypted, and this includes lots of personal data, lots of past data. So there's a risk to your data being stolen and or encrypted. There's malware and virus distribution. This, again, all of these have to do with all of these things listed here: the identity theft, the personal safety concerns. All of this is for someone's benefit, right? Monetary being the first, but one of the things I put here at the very bottom that I want to really point out is that social media location, right? There's a lot of our technology now. The intent behind the technology that was built for us to be useful, right? So that we could so that we could tell others about somewhere that we went to eat and it was really good, and we want to point that out. But the problem is that it's being used against us. So now the threat actors or bad guys will know exactly where you're at, which means they know when you're not home, right? They know when you're not near your assets. They know when you're not, or they know when you're out of town. They know when you might be away from your computer, right? So same with, we've even started to see crimes involving things like, people going to pick up Craigslist items and they get attacked, or we've had ride sharing attacks, things like that. So the risks are starting to broaden in an ever increasing digital world. So we just want to point that out, that the things that we're going to cover in each of these sections will help you to try to protect yourself and your assets. Part of the challenge in doing training classes like this is that the industry sometimes gets into what we call a FUD state, or a fear, uncertainty, and doubt, and they tend to cause anxiousness and anxiety towards the sky is falling type attack. But what we're trying to do here today is point out the risks. We're trying to point out some tools and some ways that you can combat it. We're trying to give you the ability to stay safe, and just really even give you some tips and tricks that maybe you haven't thought of, some areas that, hey, I really didn't even think about that. So the point of this whole workshop series is that you need to understand that you are being targeted. Sticking your head in the sand and not believing that you could be a victim is the first way that you can get compromised. So we do want to talk to you today. We're going to talk about, in these series, we're going to talk about hyperlinks. We're going to talk about social media and the risks there. We're going to talk about how to create and keep safe passwords. We're going to talk about how to stay safe when you're using Wi-Fi, making sure that you have backups of your computer, and then what to do. If you think you've been compromised, or you think you might have been part of a hack, then what can you do? So we're going to go over that in the future modules. The different types of threats that are out there require different precautions. There's not a one size fits all. So we talk about from a user's perspective, right? There are things you want to do from a user's perspective, and that is you want to make sure that, just when you sign up for these things, Twitter, Facebook, LinkedIn, these are great, useful tools, but a lot of folks didn't realize until recently, until the Facebook hack, that some of these social media settings out of the gate are set broad, right? They are open by default. So you need to be careful with, who can see what you're putting in your social media, especially because these are intimate details sometimes, your children's names, places that you like to vacation, places that you might be, things of that nature. So you want to be careful who can see that. You want to be careful with unexpected calls and emails and pop-ups, people that call you and ask for personal data. I've recently had someone call me and say, this is Blue Cross Blue Shield calling to verify your insurance data. Please give me your social security number so I can verify that. Well, if they were calling to verify it, they would have that information handy, and I wouldn't need to give them anything. So be careful when you get those unexpected or unknown calls out of nowhere. We want you to start to understand what multi-factor authentication is. This is a second form. So you log in with a password. That's one form of authentication. But just about any system that you're using now, let's say Gmail or Yahoo Mail or any system that you might use, including Facebook and eBay and Amazon, and all of these different websites out there have the ability to be set up to use multi-factor authentication. This is, say they text you a code and you put that code in after you put your password in, just to make sure it's you. Or they might text you and say, hey, we've noticed that you've logged in from a different location. Is this you? You just want to make sure that those settings are turned on in the locations that you use. And then very, very important is use different passwords. Don't use the same password that you use to log into Gmail that you use to log into your online banking. Don't use the same password that you're using for online banking to log into Facebook. That way, in case, as you saw on previous slides, if Facebook gets hacked, you're only compromised in that one area. You're not compromised with your banking credentials. From an email perspective, you need to understand what the hyperlinks are, and these are the links that are in there. What are the different risk factors inside of email, and what do I do with them? So we're going to talk about in the coming slides and in the coming modules about what to do with what's called shortened or encrypted URLs. You need to understand the risk of opening an attachment. You need to understand what business email compromise is, and how social engineering is trying to get you to take an action. We have something here called a Super 6 approach. We're going to go through that with, and that's really talking to you about how to inspect your emails, how to discipline yourself to understand what the email that you're looking at is, and not just go click on a link carelessly. And then finally, you need to take precautions on your network. If you're a small business, or even if you're personal, you need to make sure that you've got a firewall on your network, something between you, especially if you use a shared resource, let's say like a Comcast. Comcast is notorious for having good, fast, cheap internet, but they also don't give you a firewall. So they'll give you a cable modem, but they won't give you a firewall. And a lot of people believe that their firewall is their cable modem, and it is not. So, and these are not hard things, right? There's lots of resources to find. If you say, well, I don't have one, where do I go? You can get a firewall cheap at Best Buy for $50. You just say, hey, I need to install this on my network, and folks there can help you. You need to make sure that you have advanced endpoint protection, not just on your computer, but on your devices, on your iPads, on your Androids, on your mobile phones. You need to have endpoint protection. And then just be careful when you're out on public Wi-Fi. My grandfather used to tell me, and it's been a life lesson, that you get what you pay for, and free. Everything comes at a cost. And what I would tell you is that free public Wi-Fi comes at a cost many times of your personal protection. You need to be careful, because many of the public Wi-Fis out there have been or can be compromised. So we want to be careful there. Some precautions again with more areas, website and internet usage, right? You want to be careful to use apps to guard your data and credentials. So this is stuff like I mentioned before, web security or antivirus on your workstations. Make sure that you create and use strong passwords and don't reuse them. I mentioned this before, but using multi-factor authentication with your apps. This goes to the apps that are using on your phone. You can do that as well with using multi-factor authentication with your apps. Securing your passwords in an encrypted vault program, and I'm going to go over that in the coming slides. And consider using identity protection services. And one of the things I would tell you there is be proactive. Don't wait until you believe your identity has been compromised. Go out and get something like a LifeLock. For the amount of money that you spend or the investment that you spend on something like that, it gives you peace of mind to know that they're out there proactively monitoring for you, especially if you go back to the first slide and you look at some of those initial breaches like Equifax, right? So you want to make sure what kind of data of yours is out there. If you're going to have remote access for your employees, or you're going to have remote access at your company, make sure that that you're wireless when you're using a wireless, that you're set up securely, right? That even if you're using a hotspot, and don't be afraid to ask for assistance. Don't be afraid to call some of the technical resources out there to see if you can get help setting this up. And finally, mobiles. Be careful with your mobile phones and geolocation services. We're going to talk about that. And be careful with games and apps that access your contacts and privacies. I've watched people that install apps and they just click through the warning slides that says this app wants to access your photos, this app wants to access your microphone, this app wants to access your data. And I've watched people install it and just click yes, 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 yes. And there's no reason why a lot of these games need access to your personal data. So you want to be careful there. It's okay to say no. The game will continue to work fine without it. And finally, at the bottom, you can see here, we're going to talk about what to do if you believe you've been hacked or had your identity stolen, who to call, when to call them, what law enforcement entity you might call, or who you might contact to get your identity protection services. Thank you for sitting through this workshop series. Please check out the other ones that we're going to go through other modules and talk about some of the things that we're going to take a little bit deeper dive into some of these topics that I've mentioned.